press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Namaste and welcome all of you to today's 7 p.m. show. And today I have a very, very distinguished guest with us. Let me introduce Dr. Kanwal Sibal to you. And I think most of us, you would know him. Not only was he the Foreign Secretary of India, he is also a very distinguished scholar. Welcome, Dr. Sibal. How are you?
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Today we are having this subject. I think you tweeted about it, and that's what caught my attention. And you commented on Pratap Bhanu Mehta. Pratap Bhanu Mehta, he is considered generally by the, I think, the left academia as their prima donna as such. And any comment that he makes, a hog's limelights. And you not only commented that, you particularly, in fact, you almost tore it apart by just saying that, what did he mean by saying that a reaction to the events of 26th January, he took everybody together, people in the legal fraternity, the ex-bureaucrats, the other distinguished people, and said that they were trying to uphold order. So I think it is best that we hear your reaction from your own mouth.
Well, you know, I've been reading Pratap Bhanu Mehta for some time. And I think, I don't know when it started, but he's become very bitter and very deeply anti-Modi, anti-BJP. The reasons for this are not clear. Now, certainly he can have intellectual pretensions. In some ways, he's a thoughtful person. He expresses himself well. A few years ago, when I was reading him, I thought that he analyzed things reasonably well and had a grasp of international affairs, also internal affairs in terms of constitutional practices and everything else, which give you some food for thought. But when you become politically engaged to a point where you begin to hate a regime and hate what it stands for, then your judgment gets unbalanced. And I found in recent months that he's not able to take a balanced view. A few months ago, he wrote a piece which struck me, where he said that the people governing us are evil men. This is not the language of an intellectual, the language of a social scientist. This is the language of a moralist. Now, how can you, whatever criticism you may make of Modi or Amit Shah, I think he had these two in mind in particular. How can you call them evil men? Or it's an evil regime. So I'm afraid he's lost that essential sense of balance that an intellectual ought to have if he wants to project himself as an intellectual. Otherwise, your method of analyzing things, the views you take are so heavily covered by your personal distastes about something that you can't really project what others might feel is a reasonably balanced view of things. I think the intellectuals think that because they have the capacity to express themselves in how should I say, in a language which conveys that they are thinking through things and they are being able to place things in a larger perspective, in the perspective of trends in society, trends in political developments across the world, that they can try and they can, through that kind of thinking and approach, impress you by the canvas on which their mind is working. But the moment you begin to call people evil men and criticize everything that is done by the government and impute to them the worst motives, then I'm afraid they have to be brought down from their intellectual pedestal, which I've been inclined to do. And since I went on Twitter just 3-4 months ago, so I got an opportunity to say what I wanted to say, which I couldn't say in articles that I've been writing over a long time on essentially international affairs.
All right, sir. And actually, if you really look at the subtext of what he's been writing over the past few months, I think he is actually very supportive of the essential grammar of anarchy. And that is, I think, that is the essential of what we saw during the heydays of the Bolsheviks, that anything that leads to power is justified. And so I just read out from what he wrote, one of the more eloquent paragraphs that he said, that the most disturbing part of the Republic Day was not the events, it is the way our repressive instincts were channelized. The media acted as nothing short of the unquestioning cheerleader of the state, hiding behind pieties of the flag and feigning concern for the frontline policemen. Is this the language of an anarchist or a language of a person who has any sense of proportion for the values of democracy?
Well, you're absolutely right. I think even worse than this was calling Yogesh, the other fellow, what is his name?
Yogen Yadav.
As a true patriot. Yogen Yadav is a true patriot. As if all of us who served the country or who contributed to building up the country in our small ways and have a feeling and attachment to the country. And while actually understanding the deficiencies of governance in our country and not giving a completely clean chit to the government on every issue because they're grappling with very serious problems. But to think that the only true patriot is the one who keeps contesting the government in every forum and has no public support, because the fellow lost his deposit and fought for elections. And I can't understand how a man of his background has become a farmer leader. And I was quite amused when he said that I take moral responsibility for what happened on Republic Day. Who has given him that role in our national life where he takes moral responsibility for events on 26? I mean, he's arrogating to himself a role which is far beyond what the public has given him. So when Pratap Bhanu Mehta calls him a true patriot, you're absolutely right. He's actually using the language of anarchy, and this, I can understand that during the Bolshevik period you could use this language because you are up against a monarchical system that was highly corrupt. You were dealing with the Romanovs, but it's not the situation today. It is a democratically elected government, which has won absolute majority through an electoral process, which has been very fair and uncontested. In fact, our electoral process is far superior to that of the United States of America. And between 2014 and 2019, if you look at the number of additional millions who have voted for the BJP, you cannot say that the left-wing attacks against the Modi government have any parallel with the communist revolution in Russia or revolutions elsewhere, because it's not a dictatorial regime which is unmindful of the needs of the people and has monopolized all the wealth and power and prestige to themselves and to their family. It's not the case at all. It's ridiculous, but there it is. Unfortunately, if you allow me, I feel that it's not only him, but there are so many others in the same group who somehow have developed such extreme distaste for the BJP and for Modi personally and for the RSS that they are not able to look at the larger picture in a balanced way, and they are actually sapping the energies of the country, and they are creating internal divisions, and the press is playing this up because the press thrives on what the opposition says, because if they only concentrate on what the government says, then of course they feel they're not fulfilling their role. Even if the government is doing the right thing, they have to find reason to question what the government does or says, and therefore they must have critics. Now, unfortunately, these critics have lost all sense of proportion. And if you allow me, I feel rather surprised that the Congress Party is taking the positions it is taking, and actually indirectly encouraging the anti-national forces in this country, because the weakening of the central government is the weakening of the nation, frankly. It's nothing to do with the BJP. You launch tirades, you take up positions, you seek the capitulation of the government in Delhi, thinking that this might meet your short-term goals for destabilizing the BJP and the Modi government, but in fact you will be destabilizing the country as a whole and making it even less governable. So I just can't understand, frankly, the mindset of the intellectuals who lose absolutely no opportunity to target the government. And now the new theme is what? That like the Twin Towers attack in New York. The conspiracy theory was that the Jews were behind it, and now here the conspiracy theory is that the government itself engineered it. Government itself engineered early the Pulwama attack. Come on, there should be some sense of proportion in what you say. And if you look at the pictures of the manner in which the policemen were running for their lives, climbing down walls to escape these fellows with swords and lathis, and then you say this was engineered by the government, and this gang is implying this, and I can't see how the effort the extra effort that has been made to accommodate these peaceful protests, allow them to continue for so long without police action, even tolerating the fact that they've used cranes and tractors to get rid of these barricades and everything else, which calls into question the peaceful nature of this agitation. You impute all the faults to the government, and you are unwilling to look at what these fellows are up to. And I have a few views on the forces behind this agitation, but we can deal with that when you ask me the next question.
Yes, I have it very rightly stated. I have a hunch that you mentioned the Congress Party, and you were actually wondering what has come over the Congress Party, because it is a mainstream party and it is a national party to boot. But I think the present dispensation of Congress, it seems that they have lost all regard to national well-being or even to national security. And all they're focused on is somehow to gain power back. And I think there seems to be some kind of a think tank going within that party that feels that they are probably they're not in a position to win back the power through democratic means. So they probably have gone along with the left and probably used that, that famous Russian template, which Yuri Bezmenov, if you remember, described so beautifully. He said that, okay, there are 4 stages in the life of a state, according to the Soviet Union, where they first demoralize, then they destabilize, then they create a crisis, and through that crisis they take over, and then what they do is normalize. Normalize means they get rid of all the useful idiots. And a lot of these cheerleaders will probably come under the category of that useful idiots. Do you think Probably through their complete ignorance of history, they're headed that way. The Congress.
You know, of course, the thing is that we are very familiar with the communist parties in India. They have existed since the time of independence. At some point in time, they were ruling a couple of states and had influence across the country. And they have been also partners in coalition governments in the past. And even today, they are ruling in one state. So it's not as if communism is alien to India or its methods and tactics are alien to India. We know what happened in West Bengal over so many years, but they have not been able to do all the to do what you said in terms of the four stages and ultimately getting rid of useful idiots. I don't think that template can work at all in India because of our familiarity over 70 years of communist efforts in this country to spread their ideology, indoctrinate, especially the younger people, the students. So I'm not worried so much about that. And I think also if you look at things in perspective, when you have a country of 1.3 billion people now, so utterly diverse with such differentials in terms of poverty and well-being, and of course the regional demands that are always there on the national kitty. The national kitty is not big enough to satisfy the demands of all the lobbies. You look at the American democracy, you know, it's so fine-tuned that they want to please even minute lobbies because that can make a difference. In India, the scale of our population and the scale of problems is such that there is just no way that we can functionally, any political party functionally can satisfy all the lobbies. And the problem always is that even if you satisfy people, their level of satisfaction, their demands have become more demanding, if you like, and it's difficult to always keep them satisfied. We are seeing this phenomenon in Europe, where despite the fact that they have such high standards of living and per capita income, there's a lot of dissatisfaction in society. So that part is nothing new in terms of the problems in our society. What I find is that the opposition parties, especially in the context of the farmers' agitation today, are taking such an irresponsible position because the facts are known. The reasons why these laws have been passed have been well accepted over time, have been discussed a great deal by experts, by political parties. It has been in the manifestos of those political parties today who are agitating against this. And then, mind you, it's very clear that there are external forces behind this. There is no doubt about this, because our political correctness has gone to such a length that even a comment which is totally valid, that there are anti-national forces who take advantage of this agitation. There are Khalistani lobbies which are trying to exploit this. Even this is condemned by Pratap Bhanu Mehta, not only Pratap Mehta, but even the political parties, as if the government is selling the farmers as a whole. It's not the case. It's not the case at all. And to this, I want to add that I was a bit shocked this morning when I read the paper that the Chief Minister of Punjab, actually, if you read the implications of what he's saying, he's threatening the recreation of a Bhindranwala type of agitation in Punjab, and he's evoking the Blue Star operation. Oh, what is the? I mean, if it is a peaceful agitation, if these are genuine farmers, the government is not using violence on them. They're allowing them to demonstrate. The precautions they have taken are perfectly legitimate, because the alternative is to use violence, which they don't want to. And at the same time, they don't want the capital of the country to be besieged, like what we have seen in Islamabad by these Islamists. This is perfectly normal. But here is this man who is evoking Blue Star and threatening the possibility of Khalistani type of agitation in Punjab. and the throwing and bringing in the Pakistan factor, which is an indirect pressure on the government of India that if you don't move forward, you will be giving more opportunities to Pakistan. He's changing the terms of the debate completely. And then if there are Pakistani drones and this and that dropping weapons, then what is he doing in Punjab as a chief minister to stop this in cooperation with the government of India? So why have this posture of helplessness that Pakistan is doing a lot of mischief? And if you don't yield to the demand, if you don't capitulate, you will have a Bindrawala type of situation, and you may have to ultimately end up with a Blue Star kind of operation. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous, but he's taking that position. And the mainstream parties seem to be going along.
Actually, yes, sir. I'm coming from Captain Amrinder Singh. That was quite surprising because till now, even I've held him in fairly high esteem as far as his basic instinct about national priorities is concerned. So I don't know what has come over him. And of course, especially he's taking the position of the Pakistan threat when his own consort is a Pakistani. I mean, these are things that are not normally said. But that is a fact very well known in Punjab. And I did a stint in Punjab as election observer. And well, that was the talk that used to go on there at that time. So even if it is not reflected in the newspaper, that is not talked about out of some decency, everyone knows this in Punjab. And so it's very, very curious. I have one more take on this. And my take is also based on the way things have unfolded in the Western democracies. And that is, I think, a creeping left takeover of the democracy. Or you can, if I use a harsher term, I could say that creeping left subversion of the entire concept of democracy. And that they have done, of course, using the tools that the democracies cherish the most, that is the free speech and free assembly. And of course, we know that we have seen the tools of cultural Marxism and postmodernism that were academically developed over the last 40, 50 years. And I find this very well reflected when Pratap Bhanu Mehta says, it's a very pithy sentence, but it is full of pregnant meaning, says, the language of order and the pieties of the flag in which it is wrapped by the state and media is not about order at all. The language of order is partisan to the hilt. It is weaponized to crush dissent. It is used to empower repression. It is used to desecrate the spirit of constitutional values. Now, what do you make of this? I mean, this is some kind of, complete delegitimization of the democratic process or democratic function.
First of all, if it was factually even partially correct, I would say, all right, he has the right to exaggerate this to make a point. A lot of people do that. But when it is factually totally wrong, then making an argument like this has no meaning. In fact, my own feeling is that there is far too much dissent in this country. And dissent is not being suppressed. If there is an attempt to control the forces which want to create law and order problems or destabilize the country, or are anti-national in their thinking, whether they, the Tukre gang or whatever. We've been seeing the sort of things that they say. The whole effort to whip up, religious conflict in this country. And mask it in democratic terms, as we saw in the Shaheen Bagh case, or create a coalition of the Muslims and the Dalits. If you look at the intent behind it, then you can understand what they want to do. So if the government or any government keeps a close watch on these developments and try and control the disruptive forces in this country, it's not as if we are not aware of these disruptive forces. After all, what has happened in Jammu and Kashmir over such a long period. And if you look back at what happened in terms of terrorism at large in the country, sponsored from outside with the complicities within, you have the Maoist insurgency in this country. So government has a responsibility to try and preserve law and order and peace and social peace in the country. So simply because they take certain actions, and at times they can be excessive action, I can expect that. It is always there that things will never live up to how should I say, the highest standards of governance, and then you make that as an argument to dispute everything that the government does and question it in the way that Pratap Bhanu Mehta has done in this article is nonsensical. I mean, you look at, they talk about the Godi media and everything else, but I find that even in this so-called Godi media, there are people who come to the channels and say the most atrocious things, against the government and the country. And they're allowed to say that. The press, when I read the English language press, I don't read the Hindi press or the regional press. You read Indian Express. It is full of articles that are extremely critical of the government. Hindustan Times is a mixture. It's very critical at times. At times it supports. The Hindu is very critical. There are individual television journalists who are very critical and who look at every opportunity to put the government in a bad light. So where is the suppression of dissent? I don't see that. And in terms of social media, if you take a country like China, where they control the social media completely, they censor their own social media. They don't allow the Chinese any access to foreign social media. That is suppression of dissent. You cannot form a political party in China. There is no pluralism. You can't question the CCP. You can't question the Chinese system of governance. That is suppression of dissent. What they do to Uyghurs, what they do to the Tibetans, that is suppression of real dissent. Now, sort of because you have to pick and choose arguments in order to bring the government into disrepute, so you cite instances here and there of some excesses, which are there, undoubtedly, and then try and punish the entire system and blame the government for this. I don't agree with that kind of analysis of the situation in India, though I must admit that when I talk to some otherwise people who I consider serious, they will give you a very dark picture of the actions and the motivations of the government. And it's very difficult to reason with them. Very difficult. They have very entrenched positions, and they have this particular view of the machinations of the Modi government and how it operates. They present you with a very, very bleak picture. And as I said, it's impossible to have any rational discussion. Now, if you build your entire thesis about government on the basis of conspiracy theories, then I'm afraid one does not leave any room for any rational discussion.
Quite right, sir. I think that seems to be the trend these days. I mean, I think it's been years since I read a piece that was critical of the Chinese suppression of human rights in the English language press. I don't know that, especially the newspapers that you named. I think they never write anything bad against China. So howsoever, whatever their record of the human rights suppression may be, whatever their record against suppressing dissent may be. So it is all obviously, then it comes down to the fact that the inescapable conclusion is that this is not really some kind of expression of opinion, but agenda.
But you mentioned earlier on, which I should have addressed, about what's happening to Western democracies and all that, and the political correctness in these countries that have gone to extremes. Now, it's a very mixed picture. You have now in the Democratic Party, for instance, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and those kind of groups and personalities who are in the American parlance to the left. And uh, again, in the on the if you look at the American political scene, it is certainly a marked departure from what existed 20, 30 years ago. But then, even these lobbies, when it comes to, let's say, New York Times, Washington Post, which give space to these lobbies, which actually are the media front for these lobbies in some ways. But when it comes to Afghanistan or Syria or Iraq or Libya or whatever, they fully support the government of the United States. U.S. has a problem of racism. Even Obama tried to address it and gave it up and acknowledged that he had failed to address this problem. There's a long-standing problem going to the foundation of the United States of America as a democracy. So the United States always had a flawed democracy. One part of American democracy has been real. Another part of American democracy has been fake. There is no parallel between Indian democracy and the American democracy, frankly speaking, because our democracy is based on our traditions and the social composition of our society and the challenges that we face in governing ourselves. So you can't transplant those kind of ideas and concepts and graft them onto the Indian scene and then start analyzing what's happening in India based on those parameters, then you will just simply get it wrong. But then our intellectuals and our academic community and others are so much linked to the Western academia, especially the US academia, that they bring in all those concepts and yardsticks to examine, analyze the Indian society and see where we are failing, where our democracy is failing, and that's where I think they get it wrong. But there it is. We have to live with this situation because we are an open country. We are not blocking access to the larger world and the concepts and ideas that are prevalent today all over. And we can influence. The English language is a huge way of transmitting those ideas so easily to our intellectual class, unlike in China or in other countries which are not English speaking. This is both an advantage and a disadvantage, where we get obsessed by some of the things that the Americans are obsessed with, which have, frankly, very little relevance to our situation. But there it is. This is the price we have to pay for an open society, which gives us certain big advantages, but also which, along with it, brings us problems and disadvantages, because we create a set of intellectuals and who are alienated from from the roots of India, and their alienation is fed by connection with the Western world more and more, because their points of reference are there, are not so much in India in most cases. the points that you had raised. What more can I say? Now, one point I would like to make, which is this, that we are currently facing a very grave crisis on our borders, with China having massed 50,000 troops there. And we have also positioned an equivalent number. And there's a real threat. And we are going through a very difficult time. There's a huge burden on our armed forces and on our economy because of this. And I find that society at large is not taking this into cognizance at all. They seem to be unaware of this challenge. They're not giving it any attention. We had earlier in Punjab the trains that were not allowed to move. The roads were blocked despite the fact that this created problems of communication with regard to sending troops and provisions to our armed forces up in the north. And then you have the blockage of the attempt to block Delhi. And look at the attention that the government is being compelled to pay to this agitation, and diverting attention away from the security threats that we have in the north. And it just puzzles me that the political parties and are not paying attention to this at all. In fact, they are putting the government on the back foot, even on this China threat, by saying that where is your 56 inch? If I was given the responsibility within 15 minutes, I will chase Chinese out of Indian territory. That you are hiding the facts. They have come in and grabbed a lot of our territory. And why haven't you named China? As if Xi Jinping is naming India. These kinds of things are happening. And worse, not worse, but the other issue is the internationalization of this farmers' agitation. First of all, if you look at the farmers' agitation and the organization behind it and the finances behind it, you have to ask questions. And this thinking that these are poor farmers is belied by the facts that they can bring so many thousands of tractors and block the roads to the capital, and then have these langars and everything else. And here's a point I'd like to make, which is a sensitive point, but which is not irrelevant, which is that the gurdwaras are deeply involved in this agitation. Now, if the Muslims were to agitate and the mosques are as deeply involved in supporting a Muslim agitation, I don't know what the reaction of the society would be. But here we are simply overlooking this. It is something which is to our secular society. But there it is. But early, I was talking about the internationalization, because now you find that more and more celebrities are being manipulated to speak up on this issue, so that the government gets government continues to get a bad name, and somehow as if peaceful protests are not being allowed in the country, which again shows that there are political forces inside and outside the country which are collaborating with each other in order to bring the Modi government down if they can. So this is all very worrisome, but there it is. There is no, to my mind, there is no easy explanation for this. But I suppose we have to live with this, because the challenge to the government is very severe and its options are limited, and they can only hope that the farmers' protest will wear away on its own. To my mind, the government has made the ultimate concession that it could make, that we will hold the laws in abeyance for 18 months. And that should have been enough for the other side to end the agitation. It was a good face-saving solution for them. But they have upped the ante. They have, in fact, upped the ante and got the and given it a more international color through some recent developments.
So you're right, absolutely. And that begs the question whether this is actually a farmers' protest or the farmers' issues are just an excuse. One last question before we go into the audience question round. There is this issue of the Congress party having concluded a pact with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And your long experience in international affairs and foreign affairs. Can this kind of a pact be kept secret?
No, actually, so many political parties have these MOUs between them. It's quite normal for a ruling party, especially, to have some kind of MOUs with ruling parties elsewhere. And the idea is to show that not only the two countries are dealing with each other at the governmental level, but also dealing with each other at the political party level. And it is supposed to signal a closer relationship that is being built up. So there's nothing wrong with that, which means, therefore, that at the party-to-party level, to talk to each other, you share ideas about how the overall relationship can be strengthened. You have party-level exchanges where delegations can go from here to there and from there to here, that kind of a thing. But to keep it secret doesn't make any sense, because this is established legitimate practice all over the world. So I was not aware that this is being kept secret. But if it is being kept secret, it also merely raises the question as to why it is being kept secret.
Exactly. That's right, sir. I think also a very pertinent point about the gurdwaras being used. And I remember the gurdwaras were used in the 1980s and 90s as well. That's a very worrisome development. Of course, I have a different take on it, and we've discussed it threadbare with a lot of other intellectuals as well as well-meaning Sikh intellectuals. And it has a history. There is a narrative that was helped along by the British. And as we have done, I think we've never challenged any narratives. We've simply gone along with the narratives that were set for us by the British. And that has been a great failing. Maybe we could talk about it some other time, about the narrative setting. Of course, I'm going to talk to Mr. Vikram Sood about it, because he's written that beautiful book on narrative setting. And maybe I'll take some more time from you to discuss the narrative building part. Now, for now, I'll request my viewers to please like and share the video, and subscribe to the channel, as well as press the bell icon. Of course, help us with whatever contributions you can make. And now we move to the audience questions and answers.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
नरेंद्र योगी दीक्षित जी, अपना ख्याल रखिएगा, भारत में ब्राह्मणों की प्राणों की कीमत नहीं होती, ऐसा महसूस करता हूँ। ओके, इंटेलेक्चुअल्स को सुन के अच्छा लगता है। राम राम। धन्यवाद नरेंद्र जी, थैंक यू फॉर द कंसर्न जी। एज ऑफ फायर, in my opinion, left takeover is a phenomenon more in British descendant states. Brits have a tendency to self-loathe. Look at French or North Euro countries, though.
No, I'm not too sure about that. The British have a tendency to self-loathe. On the contrary, I think Brexit shows that the British still have visions of playing an international role, unfettered from Europe, that they can recreate in part the kind of aura that the British had when they had an empire. Yes, there is always has been a kind of a leftist thinking in Britain, but to my mind, Britain essentially at heart is a very right-wing country, and this is part of its history. It still has monarchy. It still has a House of Lords. It still has and a kind of adulation that the monarchy enjoys with the British public. It is a class system which is still there, very much so. The education system is structured in such a way that if you are Eton, Harrow, or Oxford, Cambridge, then you have an entry into the best positions in society. But if you are from comprehensive schools or from those kind of schools, then chances of you being able to get into the key positions in the financial sector or in government or elsewhere are to that extent limited. So I don't think this is true that Britons are marked by self-loathing. I haven't seen any, and the way, of course, they lecture us. Interestingly, I don't know if your readers, if your viewers have seen the latest report of Chatham House, which is called Global Britain, Global Broker. And it is a long document, 50, 60 pages, which charts out what Britain should do after Brexit. And it warns the British government that don't over-rely on India, because India will always be a difficult partner. It'll never do your bidding effectively. And this whole concept of Johnson of having a group of 10 democracies will very quickly get reduced to 9, because India will not play the role that you think it will. And I don't see any self-loathing in that. I think I see a lot of arrogance in that.
All right, so let's move to the next question. There are quite a lot of questions, so we have to move quickly on them. Sanatani, first, Islamists, left liberals, Khalistanis, evangelists, Maoists join every protest and siege the nation. How does India survive this internal subversion?
This is a challenge before the government. It definitely is, and especially this government. This challenge was always there, but somehow it has got sharpened under the BJP government. And there is this big thing being built around Hindutva and RSS and Modi himself. And there's an attempt to deepen the fault lines in the country. No matter what the Modi government does, no matter what it says, no matter what even the RSS chief says in terms of his thinking, they're not willing to look at any evolution of thinking in this RSS. They should go back to Savarkar and they'll quote selectively from him as if nothing has changed since then. And then there is this frustration that Modi has won again, and with a larger majority. How do they come back to power? The only way is to bring Modi down and promote all the internal fissures in India in every way they can. So all these people that have been mentioned, Islamists and Maoists and everybody, as they get together and then try to create problems. And unfortunately, in our democracy, we have to live with this. But the government is trying very hard to build a broad social base in this country and assert our traditional civilizational values and build a consensus on them throughout the country. And I hope that they will progressively succeed, but there'll always be a challenge and pushback by those who've always held different views.
Right. Next one. So it's extremely disheartening to see that a government with 303 seats seems handicapped to get these anarchists in control. Is this some grand plan or complete incompetence? Either way, India is losing.
See, the challenge really is that we are confronted essentially with a Punjabi farmer agitation. And Punjab is a sensitive state. It's a border state. And it has created a lot of problems in the past for the country. So if any violence was used against them, it would have blown up. situation. In any case, even if the fears was exaggerated, the government can't take a risk. Therefore, they tried as hard as they could to deal with this situation as peacefully as possible without resort to violence. But this has been construed as a weakness by the other side, and they have not changed their basic position that government must capitulate to their demands, to their ultimatums. The government is left with no good option, frankly, and in fact, the options are they've tried everything. The Supreme Court, they've tried agreeing to hold the laws in abeyance. It is not working. One would have thought that the desecration of the Red Fort and what happened would have delegitimized this, but this doesn't seem to have happened to the degree that the government might want. And now Mr. Takayat is raising the ante even more. So I'm afraid it's not incompetence. It is just caution by the government that let's not have a conflagration in Punjab and in parts of Haryana and Western UP, and that's holding his hand. So to every problem, there never is an easy solution. So let's see.
Yes, you're quite right. Of course, as far as Western UP is concerned, I'm not too worried because Rakesh Tikait has hardly any support there. But then combined with the Punjabi troublemakers, the Punjab troublemakers, and I think a lot of what is called political support, overt now. Earlier it was covert, now it is overt. Let's move to the next question.
No, look at the Punjab Chief Minister. He said in his, I commented on that. He
Yes,
said
sir.
that, the political parties have nothing to do with this agitation. We don't have to tell them what is acceptable or not acceptable, but he is giving full support to the agitation. So there is this double speak. So both the Akalis and the Congress in Punjab are behind this agitation.
Right. Next one, Munish Rathi. I belong to Jat community and seeing close ones falling to left agenda. I tried hard with facts to convince. It seems everyone's gone dumb. What to do? You can't convince the left with facts.
Well, because they have an ideological view. And once you have an ideological view, then that to that extent, rationality as we see it doesn't apply. Because the ideologues think that their views are based on the ultimate rationality. Marxism is supposed to be extremely rational. So they'll never get convinced of any other point of view because they think that the truth is only in that leftist doctrine. So it's a losing game, and the rest of the world has actually disavowed leftism. The centers of leftism or communism or socialism in the world have collapsed or have changed their colors to such a degree that it is only an eyewash. Look at China; it is state capitalism, nothing to do with socialism. Well, I'm afraid won't be able to convince the ideologues because they're very comfortable with their prejudice, with their prejudices.
Quite right. In fact, we had a full session on this. We had two sessions on this. One about Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, and the next session on how to counter Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. I think those two videos are available on the Jaipur Dialogues. So you can go, Munish, and watch them. And be certain that the radicals cannot be challenged with facts. You have to use some other methodology. Manas Sharma, why so much sympathy for illegal squatters? Well, I think that has already been dealt with. So I think I will pass this question. I'll take the next one. Hint, BJP, RSS are demonized. How to de-demonize them? Thank you for the suggestion. You want to comment, sir?
Well, actually, this demonization has been partly successful, at least internationally, that I can tell you, because I find this propaganda against the BJP and Hindutva and intolerance and lynchings and suppression of dissent and erosion of democracy, this narrative that the opposition has spread, has found very receptive ears in the left liberal lobbies abroad, in the press, in the academia, in political circles. So there's a lot of prejudices that got developed against the Modi government. Now, that doesn't mean that at the government level they won't deal with India. At the government level, they are embracing China all the time, despite everything that China does. So that's a different thing. But at the academic, media, scholarly level, in some sections of the political class, there is deep prejudice, which is being spread and fueled by our own people. Our own people.
Yes, it is being done by our own.
I've seen the writings in the international press. They're so terrible. They're so one-sided. They are vilifying the government and Modi and the situation in India. All this talk about, you've seen this talk about Hitler and Kristallnacht and fascism and Mussolini and everything else. Now, people abroad who are not familiar with India, they say, look, if responsible Indians talk like that, there must be some truth in it.
Quite right. And that trope about Mussolini, it is missing Mao, by the way. Indian government is fighting against combination of corrupt bureaucracy plus corrupt judiciary, communists, jihadists, Christian missionaries, American CIA, anti-national forces. Thank you for the comment, Nareshji. I think that is broadly it. And the next question, Poonam Abi. In earlier days, even Muslims were seen distributing free biryani. In this Andolan, mosques involved in it, as some attendees, Shaheen Bagh attendees, were there. Allahu Akbar and pro-Pak slogans are being chanted, and Islami and Pak flags too have been cited in this rebellion. It is not Andolan. I think there is some sort of an ISI connection to this.
I'm sure they would be fishing in these troubled waters. Absolutely, it's a godsend opportunity. You've seen how they've been trying to boost the Khalistani narrative and the Khalistani movement. And as we well know, in all these demonstrations that we have seen, especially in the UK, in London, you can see the Pakistanis and the Sikh diaspora, Khalistani types, agitating together. The same is true in Canada and in some other countries. So clearly that is there. But the question mark in my mind is, while I accept this, but how does it explain the conduct of the Congress Party or the NSP or any of these mainstream parties? I can't for a moment believe that they are dancing to the ISI agenda. So it's a mixture of ISI interference and promoting subversion in India, plus for short-term gains, the opposition losing focus and thinking that their real enemy is the Modi government when the real enemy is elsewhere. And they are, in fact, contributing to this internal subversion by their short-sighted policies.
Next one. Naresh Sharma. The real strength of this kind of agitation is to hold the place, roads where normal public suffers a lot. If government shifts them to the fixed place, agitation definitely would have failed.
Yeah, but if you try to forcibly remove them from where they are, you're going to have a clash. I mean, they have done their sums, so they know what they're doing. And this Rasta Roko business is old hat, and they've seen what happened in Pakistan, where that fellow who's now died, that Islamist fellow,
Khadim Rizvi.
He twice blocked the road to Islamabad, and even the military government had to buckle. So, and then they have in view what happened elsewhere in the world, where people came out in the streets and held demonstrations against the government and created an international backlash if the government acted strongly or used force. So there is a very organized mind and a strategic mind behind all this that is happening. And my concern is that the mainstream parties are becoming participant in this, wittingly or unwittingly. But the question about forcibly, about removing them to a particular side. Now, people are saying that the Supreme Court should pass some kind of a judgment where only demonstrations in fixed places should be allowed. But how to implement that? How to enforce that? People can still defy the Supreme Court.
They've already done it.
Select anywhere they want. Yeah. So that's not a solution. If these lobbies are hell bent on creating problems for the government and in the process destabilizing the society, then what can you do? It's very difficult in a democratic society, and then we are so much open to judgment and criticism by the rest of the world, and we have to live in this world also. It becomes very difficult to take really strong action, which will involve the use of force. As it is, even the UN Secretary General, the Human Rights Commissioner in Geneva, they earlier criticized us on the CA, the Shaheen Bagh thing, and the Delhi riots, and they will go down if force was used against farmers. Because when you talk of farmers, the feeling is that these are innocent, poor people who are struggling for their lives, and the state is oppressive. I mean, they really don't know that the kind of farmers that are agitating are not the kind of farmers that you and I have in mind.
Right. Next question. Ishi Prasad, I think Modi ji should take some action. Okay, sure. Next one.
Right.
You wanted to say something?
No, I think at the end of the day, at some stage, action will have to be taken. Now, what kind of action that will be depends. If we can break up this agitation, create divisions within, but I think the government has reached the end of its tether. They can't make any more concessions. So repealing the laws would actually mean capitulation, and that is that'll strike a quasi-mortal blow to the Modi government.
That would be unfair to the about more than 95% of farmers who stand to benefit from these laws. So
absolutely,
it is only, even in Punjab, it is only a section of rich landlords and the middlemen who are spearheading this agitation.
That's right.
Next question. Leftists lack caliber, but they have better networks. Yes, quite sure.
Yes and no, because they have greater sway in the universities and the academic world, and this is everywhere. Leftist ideas are dominant in this kind of a world of academia and universities and scholars and this and that, because very few right-wing intellectuals are recognized as intellectuals, or really are able to influence thinking, broad thinking, because right wing has become a very bad odor, especially because of what happened during the Second World War and this and that, fascism and stuff like that. So yes, the leftists enjoy that advantage in those kind of crowds, and those are important in terms of shaping public opinion.
Right. So that brings us to the end of the question answer session. So thank you very much, sir. We have had a very, very enlightening and very, very engrossing session. And thank you to all viewers. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Thank you very much.